PaliSuttas.com. If you're interested in purchasing my books, you can find links, some of them from the Pali Sutta, or you can go directly to my publishing website, chronicpress.com. You can also find my YouTube channel at Naked Dharma in YouTube. It'll come up as the first search if you search for that argument. It is customary to hold your questions till the end of the Dharma talk. However, I prefer if you ask your questions during the course of the talk, in case you have a question, so everything that I'm discussing is uppermost in your mind when you ask the question. And also at the end, if you have questions, we can discuss them. The talk is available on note card, and it is available now. Please IM me at the end of the talk if you would like a copy of the note card. And also, most of my talks are available at the Mount Everest Sim in the library. Go to Mount Everest Sim, look for the Buddhist College, then go up the hill to the library, and then into the library there's a room, and in the room is a table, and on the table are a bunch of scrolls, and those scrolls are my talks. Nothing to do with me. They asked if they could archive my talks in Second Life, and I said sure. So most of them are available. All of them will be available eventually. And today, for those of you who may or may not be aware, I am doing a series of 34 talks on the first section of the second part of the Pali Canon, which is the Digha Nikaya, is the first section of the Sutta Pitaka, which is the second part of the Pali Canon. And this section of the Pali Canon, the Nikayas, are considered to be closest to the original pre-sectarian texts, which underlie all schools of Buddhism, both Hinayana and Mahayana. I've done the first two suttas so far. Today is sutta number 3. The whole project will take approximately 34 weeks, and then will be published in a book. Also, my book, Fundamental View, is based on a series of 10 talks that I gave last year at the Buddha Center. So if you're interested in looking at that, that too is available. So, without further ado, let's begin with the Ambattha Sutta, the conversation with Ambattha, which is the third sutta of the Digha Nikaya. This sutta takes place at Icanankala in Kosala, a monarchy. Northwest of Magadha, Kosala corresponds to modern Awadh in Uttar Pradesh in northeast India. Kosala was a great power, but had been weakened by a series of wars with Magadha, which annexed Kosala in the 300s before the Common Era, after the Buddha's death around 400 BCE. Kosala dominated and eventually destroyed the Buddha's home country, the Shakya country, for which reason the Buddha is sometimes referred to as a Kosalan. King Pasenadi of Kosala was a lay follower of the Buddha who built many monasteries. He was eventually overthrown by a palace coup and died of exposure outside the capital city of Magadha while trying to get help from his powerful neighbor. Icanankala was a sacred center of the Brahmins, who gathered here twice a year to recite the Vedas and discuss their interpretations of the meanings of the Vedic scriptures. Icanankala was near Ukarta, the domain of the Brahmin Pukarsadi, to whom the king had made a gift of the town. This kind of political structure is frequently mentioned in the Pali Canon, and it was clearly common at the time. So the Kshatriyas and the Brahmins had a little arrangement there, where the king would put Brahmins in charge of various towns and villages under his control. The Buddha was living alone in the dense woods. Actually, I shouldn't say alone. That's actually a good question. I'm going to have to look into that alone business. Let's just say he was living in the dense woods outside Icanankala, which was a rich agricultural area, and when Pukarasadi heard tell of him. So Pukarasadi sent his pupil Ambattha to test the Buddha. Ambattha was a young student of the Vedas who knew the mantras, expounded the rules, rituals, lore of sounds and meanings, oral tradition, philosophy, and physiognomy, and he was regarded by his teacher as fully accomplished. The test was to consist in an evaluation of the marks of a great man. One of the more curious traditions of India, fully accepted and recited throughout the Pali Canon, is that the marks of a great or superior man is that of the marks of a great or superior man. These are quite literally bodily marks that can be observed and were observed on the body of Gautama when he was born. And I'd like to quote a comment on that from T.W. Rhys-Davids, who's translator of the Dialogues of the Buddha. And he says, "They are in part adaptations to a man of poetical epithets applied to the sun or to the personification of the mystic human sacrifice, partly characteristics of personal beauty, such as any man might have, and one or two of them, the little wart, for instance, between the eyes with white hair in it, and the protuberance at the top of the head, may possibly be added in reminiscence of personal bodily peculiarities which Gautama actually had. Thus they are that's unquote. Thus they are irrespective of age, obviously, if they could be detected on the body of a Buddha when he was still an infant. As Pokhara Sadi himself says, a man with the marks is destined to become either, quote, a wheel-turning righteous monarch of the law, unquote, if he remains a householder, or if he renounces the household life, he will become a fully enlightened Buddha, quote, who draws back the veil from the world, unquote. In fact, there are 32 major marks and 80 minor marks of the great man. Interestingly, in Buddhism, 32 is also the number of the parts of the body. And in Kabbalah, for those of you who are interested in the Western esoteric tradition, it is the number of the paths of wisdom, which together describe the structure of reality, both macrocosmic and microcosmic. In Mahayana tradition, these characteristics describe the Buddha's subtle energy body, the Sambhogakaya, not the physical form or the Nirmanakaya. Nevertheless, although much is often made of the incongruity of the signs with physical facts, most of them are not hard to visualize with a little imagination. The 32 major marks, the Mahapursha Lakshana, include flat feet, long slender fingers, pliant hands and feet, finely webbed toes and fingers. Extreme forms of this are a recognized medical disorder called syndactyly. But there is no need to suppose that the Buddha's hands and feet were actually malformed, since the Buddha is generally described as handsome. And there are moderate forms of syndactyly which do not reach the point of an actual malformation. And I did happen to find an example of it online. So there's a picture of someone with exactly the feature that is ascribed to the Buddha. Full-sized heels with arched insteps, thighs like a royal stag, perhaps strong, yet shapely, long arms, a small member, dark curly hair, a clear golden-hued complexion, soft, smooth skin, rounded soles, palms, shoulders, and crown of the head, a leonine torso, full-chested and muscular perhaps, upright and erect, full round shoulders. The Indians had a very strong concept of roundedness as a part of the male physique. White, even closely spaced teeth, leonine or leonine jaw, square and prominent perhaps, ample saliva, which the text points out improves the taste of food. A long and broad tongue, deep and resonant voice, dark brown or deep blue eyes, long eyelashes, a tuft of white or gray hair between the eyebrows, and a top knot or other protuberance on the top of the head or at the top of the head. Just a few of the marks cannot be explained naturalistically, and these include the 1,000-spoked wheel sign on the feet, the 10-foot aura, and 40 teeth. This is nothing other than a list of the ideal qualities of a male based on the best possible karma according to the Indian aesthetics of the Buddha's time. There's a book by John Powers, I think it is, called A Bull of a Man, which actually discusses this at great length. In other words, the Buddha's body conformed to the contemporary Indian standard of male perfection. The 80 minor marks give additional details concerning the hands, the feet, the walk, the torso, skin, body, strength, head, hair, breath, etc., in much the same vein. I won't go into the details. The law of karma dictates, of course, that the being ready to be reborn, the Gandhabba, take a body with the characteristics corresponding to their karma. Today, we would say that he or she has good genes. That's what we call good karma today. Thus, Buddhism supports the notion that some people are better born than others, but this is less impressive than it sounds when one realizes that everyone is a stew of good and bad karma. In fact, a good birth might exhaust one's good karma and thus expose one to the risk of a bad rebirth if something is not done in the present life. However, we are essentially free in terms of our intentionality, and it is intentionality, not action, that generates new karma, according to the Buddha. Therefore, the fact of a good rebirth is less karmically significant than one might otherwise be inclined to think, certainly far less significant than in Hinduism, where caste is lifelong and the differences between the castes are strongly emphasized. The Buddha, on the other hand, admitted that all Indian castes to the Sangha and recognized all human beings as a single species. Therefore, Ambattha, with all the pride and arrogance of youth, went to look at the Buddha. We are told that Ambattha traveled by carriage with an entourage of young men, then dismounted and had to walk into the dense jungle where the Buddha was living. Okay, I have a feeling my slides are out of order, but there's nothing I can do about that. Arriving at the clearing, Ambattha finds a number of monks walking up and down in the open air, probably practicing the Buddhist walking meditation. And at this point, we're going to take 10 minutes to listen to a YouTube video on walking meditation presented by the Venerable Yuta Dhammo. Some of you will be familiar with this eminent individual. He is a teacher at Buddha Center as well as myself, and has a YouTube channel with some very useful and interesting information on Buddhism, including this video on the practice of walking meditation. It will take 10 minutes. If you would click on it and watch it in your browser, I will do so as well, and I will return when it completes. So if you do that now, we'll be back in 10 minutes.
Hi. So in this video, I will be explaining the technique of walking meditation. Walking meditation has many of the same benefits of sitting meditation. So in the same way as when we do the sitting meditation, we're going to try to keep the mind in the present moment and aware of the phenomena as they arise, to try to create a clear awareness of the reality around us. But the question comes, why then do we have to switch to walking meditation? Why is it not enough that we sit still and do sitting meditation? This is because walking meditation has several benefits which are not found in the sitting meditation. First of all, we're able to then walk long distances. We find that nowadays because we sit so much, we're sitting in cars, or we're sitting in an office, or we're sitting in school, or so on, we find that we're unable to undertake long journeys on foot. Whereas in ancient times we would have been able to walk 20 or 30 kilometers a day even. Nowadays we find that even a walk to the store is too much of a hassle. The second benefit from walking meditation is that it gives us patience and it gives us endurance. Because it is something which is done very slowly and it is very repetitious, we find that it tests our patience. And if we are practicing it on a daily basis, it can lift our patience and our endurance in any kind of work or activity that we have to do, which is perhaps unpleasant. Even though it's something that we know we have to do, we might not wish to do it. Once we practice walking meditation, we can overcome this. The third is that it helps to overcome sicknesses which exist in the body. If we have any sort of sickness, a disease, or even diseases which are otherwise uncurable. Sometimes people, through the practice of meditation, have cured cancer, have overcome many kinds of sicknesses in the body, simply through the practice of meditation. Because at the moment of walking meditation, both your mind is very focused and your body is very calm. So just with other martial arts or other methods of healing using the mind, walking meditation is something which, as a byproduct, can help to heal the body. The fourth benefit is the effect that it has on the digestive system. So when we sit around all the time, when we're not doing anything with the body, we find that sometimes our body's ability to digest the food which we've eaten can be limited. When we do the walking meditation, especially because it's slow and repetitious, the body is given a chance to work through the food which we have eaten and digest it for the best benefit for our body. The fifth benefit, which is most important in the meditation practice, and the reason why we do the walking before we do the sitting, is that the concentration which comes from walking, because it's dynamic, that it lasts into the sitting meditation. It lasts for a long time. We can find that if we just do sitting meditation, once we finish, our concentration dissipates very quickly. When we practice walking meditation, this is otherwise, and it continues on into the sitting meditation. So the concentration has much more strength, and when we begin to do the sitting meditation after the walking, we find that we're already ready. We're already able to focus the mind very quickly on the phenomena as they arise. So these are the reasons, some of the reasons anyway, why we practice walking meditation as well as sitting meditation. And now I'd like to give a demonstration on how exactly we do the walking meditation. Walking meditation is performed with the feet close together, the hands, right hand holding the left hand, either in front or in behind. The eyes are open, and you're looking at the floor in front of you, about 2 meters out. And you're going to walk in a line. You can walk about 3 or 4 meters, with your eyes looking at the floor in front, the ground in front of you, about 2 meters or 6 feet out. You start with the right foot, and you move it 1 foot length, with the heel just to be in line with the toes of the back foot. And then the same with the left foot. 1 foot length each time. As you do this, you say to yourself, as we have been from the beginning of this series, you make a note of the motion as it occurs. So here we say to ourselves, stepping right, stepping left, stepping right, and so on. Making the acknowledgement or the note, making the noting at the moment of the movement. Stepping left, stepping right, stepping left, stepping right, stepping left, stepping right, stepping left, and on until you reach the end of the walking path. Once you come to the end, we have to turn around. We're going to walk in the other direction. The method of turning around is to bring the back foot up to stand next to the front foot. As you do this, you say to yourself, stopping, 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 just coming aware of the fact that you're stopping. Once you're standing still, say to yourself, standing, standing, standing. And when you go to turn around, the method of turning is to lift the right foot off the floor and turn it 90 degrees, saying to yourself, 1 time, turning, And then the left foot the same, turning. And one more time, turning, turning. And then you're facing the other direction. When you're standing in the other direction, you start all over. Say to yourself, standing, standing, standing. And then stepping right, stepping left, stepping right, stepping left. And the most important part is that you're making the acknowledgement as the foot moves. So if you say to yourself, stepping right and then move, or you move first and then say stepping right, this is incorrect because you're not really aware of the action as it occurs. To make a correct acknowledgement and to bring about the clarity of mind which we're hoping for, you have to move the foot as you make the acknowledgement. Stepping right, stepping left. And as you're walking, if something comes into your mind, say a thought or so on, or a feeling or some emotion arises, during that time, instead of continuing to walk and letting your mind get distracted, bring your back foot up and actually stop in the middle of your walking step. Say to yourself, stopping, stopping, stopping. And then become aware of the thought or aware of the emotion and say to yourself, thinking, 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 or angry, or sad, or bored, or happy. If you feel pain, say pain, and so on. And once it goes away, then continue on your walking. Stepping right, stepping left, stepping right, stepping left, and so on. And the technique is to walk back and forth, making the acknowledgement in your mind. So you come to the end and then bring the foot up again, stopping, stopping, stopping. Standing, standing, standing. Turning, 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 turning. And then standing, 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 and so on. To go back and forth for, say, 10 minutes. And here we try to balance the walking meditation with the sitting meditation. So if suppose you were to do 10 minutes of walking meditation, then we would also expect that you would do 10 minutes of sitting meditation. If you do 15 minutes of walking meditation, then also do 15 minutes of sitting meditation, and so on.
Okay, mine has completed, so I'm assuming everyone else's has. Does anyone have any questions on the talk so far?
Thank you for tuning in.
This is a good point, perhaps, just to take a brief break and address any questions anyone has. The way we're working with these talks is I'm going through each sutta pretty fully, sutta by sutta, from the beginning. So if a topic like walking meditation comes up in the course of a sutta and it's the first reference to that topic, we'll take the time to go explore that topic a bit so that you're familiar with it before we continue on with the discussion of the sutta. So any questions on anything up to now before I continue? Seems not. Okay, let's continue then. The monastics, thinking that the Buddha might enjoy conversing with such a young man, quote unquote, direct him to the Buddha's hut, the door of which is closed and bolted, interestingly. From the description, I inferred that it is early afternoon and the Buddha is taking his customary nap. The Buddha is, as I mentioned in a talk 1 or 2 talks ago, he's one of the great nappers of history and is recognized as such. I read a book on napping once, and he was listed as one of the, along with Winston Churchill and a variety of others. He was criticized for that, too. He was criticized for taking a nap in the afternoon. But he defended himself, saying that he lay on his right side and this was his fashion of taking a nap in the afternoon, lying on his right side, which is, of course, also how he died, lying on his right side. Therefore, Ambattha is instructed to go quietly to the door, cough, and knock on the bolt, which he does. And that's why I hesitated when I was talking about him being alone, because, in fact, clearly he's not alone. There were other monastics present. The Buddha answers the door, and Ambattha enters along with his retinue of young men. Ambattha's friends sit down politely, but Ambattha paces up and down before the Buddha, who is seated, and utters some conventional words of politeness without sincerity. The Buddha is not impressed and rebukes him with the words, quote, "Well now, Ambattha, would you behave like this if you were talking to venerable and learned Brahmins, teachers of teachers, as you do with me, walking and standing as I am sitting, and uttering vague words of politeness?" Unquote. Not one to be rebuked, Ambattha replies, quote, "No, Reverend Gautama, a Brahmin should sit with a sitting Brahmin, but as for those shaven little ascetics, menials, black scourings from Brahma's foot, with them it is fitting to speak just as I do with the Reverend Gautama." Unquote. We can see that the Buddha was not popular with everyone. Ambattha, in effect, calls the Buddha a nigger, and pardon the expression, but that's exactly what he did. However, the Buddha does not take the bait. Rather, he says, quote, "Ambattha, you came here seeking something. Whatever it was you came for, you should listen attentively to hear about it. Ambattha, you have not perfected your training. Your conceit of being trained is due to nothing but inexperience." Unquote. The Buddha's comment infuriated Ambattha, who loses it and hurls curses and insults at the Buddha. Ambattha's interest in physiognomy seems to be related to racialism, for next he attacks the shopkins, the Buddha's own clan, as fierce, rough-spoken, touchy, violent, and menial, and he complains that they do not respect Brahmins. This last comment is a reference to the fact that the caste system had not yet taken root in Shakya, which had not assimilated Western Brahmanic superiority. And as I've mentioned in other talks, the whole Brahmanic system was very weak in northeast India, unlike Western India, northwest India, where it was well established. Rather like Jesus, who was born in an outlying area, the outlying area of Galilee, the Buddha was born in the Shakyan Republic, which is again sort of a peripheral area. So in many respects, Buddhism and Christianity are similar, and that's another one, another similarity. The Buddha recognizes that the Shakyans had done something to offend Ambattha, so he asks him what it might have been. Apparently, while on a trip to Vastu, the capital of the Shakyan clan, on some business for his teacher, Pukarasati, he went to the meeting hall of the Shakyans, and rather than honoring him and offering him a seat as he expected, it seemed to Ambattha that they were laughing at him and making light of him, and he was offended, and so acquired the grudge that Shakyans do not honor Brahmins, which may also be rooted in an historical fact. The Buddha suggests to Ambattha that he is overreacting and that the Shakyans can do what they want in their own meeting hall. Ambattha reminds the Buddha that the Brahmins are the innately superior caste, a fact not established in Shakya. Clearly, this is the crux of the issue, so the Buddha decides to turn the tables by asking after Ambattha's own family lineage, which he tells the Buddha is Kanhayan. The Buddha points out that the Kanhayan were subject to the Shakyans in times past, and that Ambattha is descended from King Okaka, as are the Shakyans, but through a slave girl named Dissa, who had a black child named Kanha, black, by the king. And that is my fanciful imagining of what Kanha might have looked like in that slide. Hence the name of his family. The name of the Shakyans, on the other hand, means strong as teak, from the word Saka. The Shopkins descended from the 4 elder legitimate sons of King Okaka, who intermarried with their own sisters to maintain the blood purity of the Shopkin line. In this way, the Buddha shows Ambattha that his birth is inferior to the Buddha's, based on Ambattha's own line of thinking. This is an excellent example of how the Buddha used common ground as a basis for communicating with his audience. At this stage, Ambattha's friends erupt in anger, entreating the Buddha to honor Ambattha as his equal, for he is well born. However, the Buddha tells the young man to allow Ambattha to speak if he is superior, or if he is inferior, as the Buddha has suggested or implied, then they can speak in his behalf. The implication clearly being that because they spoke, Ambattha is in fact inferior. Intimidated, the young men shut up. When pressured by the Buddha, Ambattha acknowledges that Dase, the king's slave, was in fact the ancestor of the Kanhayans, at which his friends exclaim in shock that he is in fact ill-born. Mission accomplished, the Buddha now defends Ambattha to his friends, pointing out that Kanha became a great and powerful rishi in the south, where he learned the mantras. Asking King Okaka for the hand of his daughter, Madurupi, the king is outraged by the request, which he considers impertinent. Therefore, Kanha, now revealed as a powerful sorcerer, similar in fact to the story of Milarepa, for those of you who are familiar with that Tibetan story, curses the land, and so the king relents, allowing him to marry his daughter. This story also proves, incidentally, that any such theories of race superiority are completely alien to the Buddha's thinking, who clearly uses these arguments to ambush Ambattha, not because he believes in them. This is an important point to recognize because of the abuse of Buddhist ideas by right-wing followers of people like René Guénon, Julius Evola, Savitri Devi, Adolf Hitler, and others, who are more allied with Hindu caste theories than with Buddhism, despite their appropriation of the swastika, which is a Buddhist as well as a Hindu symbol. The Buddha bore on, asking Ambattha what the caste of the son of a Brahmin and a Kshatriya, the Pali word is Katiya, parents would be. The Brahmins are, of course, the priestly caste, the quote-unquote superior priestly caste. The Kshatriyas are, of course, the warrior military caste, or the caste of secular rulers. So the Buddha asks what Ambattha, according to the rules of caste, what the caste would the son of a Brahmin and a Kshatriya be. And Ambattha recognizes that they would both be accepted as Brahmins, but they would not be accepted as Kshatriyas because of the mixed marriage. The Kshatriyas regard that as a mixed marriage, the Brahmins do not. Thus, the Kshatriyas follow a stricter rule than the Brahmins, hinted at before in connection with the Shakyans, who intermarried with their sisters to preserve the blood purity of their lineage. And there's another sutta in which this is alluded to as well. Similarly, a disgraced Brahmin would be expelled from his caste, but the Brahmins would honor a disgraced Kshatriya. Either these strange rules originate in the laws of Manu, or they may be a Buddhist parody of the latter. I'm not sure of that. I suspect it's true. It's actually literally true that the Brahmins simply had a different way of classifying castes than the Kshatriyas. Finally, the Buddha finishes off by quoting the Brahma Sanatkumara. The Sanskrit name is Sanatkumara, and the name means eternal youth, who appears in the Jana Vasabha Sutta as an advocate for the Buddha. So the Buddha is quoting a god, a deity, and he says, the quotation is, "The Katiya is best among those who value clan. He with knowledge and conduct is best of gods and men," unquote. The Buddha declares that this is his view also. And T.W. Rhys-Davids, who I quoted earlier, has a comment about this as well, which I will quote. Quoting, Hofrath Buehler has pointed out that in the Mahabharata 3.185, Bombay edition, there is an interesting passage where Sanatkumara, the Sanskrit form of the name Sanatkumara, is actually represented by the Brahmins themselves as having uttered, as referee in a dispute on a point similar to the one here discussed, not indeed the actual words here imputed to him, but others of very similar import. Unquote. Sanatkumara is one of the four Kumaras, four sages or rishis who wander the universe together as divine children. This is, of course, in the Vedic system. They are the first mind-born creations and sons of Brahma. Contrary to Brahma's wishes, they are celibate, or brahmacharya, teachers. They are also listed amongst 12 great devotees, or mahajanas, of bhakti. That is, of course, bhakti is the devotional yoga, or the yoga of love, very popular in popular Hinduism today. And they're also associated with Krishna and sometimes with Shiva. Sanatkumara, along with his three brothers, named Sanaka, Sanatana, and Sanandana, is also mentioned in the Mahabharata as one of the 7 sages or rishis, the authors of the Vedas. The Sanatkumara Sanghita, which I will pronounce it again, the Sanatkumara Sanghita is attributed to him. I've not read that, but I'm looking forward to doing so, actually. He is also a yoga preceptor and an advocate of the religion of inward contemplation, or nivriti, referred to in the Bhagavad Gita. In addition to advocating Buddhism, he is associated with Sankhya philosophy. Interestingly, in this context, the Mahabharata represents Sanatkumara as proposing a classification of beings from lowest to highest based on their color, from black, brown, to red, yellow, and white, and a blue race is also alluded to. A living entity proceeds through the colors in his journey in order from black to white, whereupon he achieves liberation. And that's a structure that you may, if you've attended my talk on the first sutta, in which the Buddha itemizes the 62 or 64 wrong views, that does sound like one of the philosophies that the Buddha mentions. One wonders if the Buddha's reply to Ambattha is partly a parody of Sanatkumara. Having annihilated Ambattha's arguments, Ambattha appears to be finely chastened and simply asks what is the knowledge and conduct that makes one best in the spiritual realm. This is the turning point of the conversation. The Buddha says that knowledge and conduct is attained by the abandonment of all notions of racial and class superiority and inferiority. Rather, it is identical with the Dharma of a Tathagata. Referring to this Dharma as the unexcelled attainment, quote unquote, the Buddha observes that there are 4 ways that one can fail to achieve it, depending on how one's food is got. By windfalls, by digging tubers and roots, by tending the flame of a fire hearth at the edge of a village, and finally by building a guest house for those who have attained at a crossroads. The implication of this somewhat unusual metaphor seems to be that a true spiritual aspirant does not gather food for himself, not even windfalls, referring presumably to the Buddhist practice of alms. The Buddha declares that since neither Pukarasati nor Ambattha do this, they are incapable of attaining the unexcelled knowledge and conduct, and that their claims to superiority are belied. The Buddha denigrates Pukarasati and Ambattha as mere memorizers of sacred texts. Quote, "Yet you do not thereby become a sage or one practiced in the way of a sage. Such a thing is not possible." Unquote. The implication is that the Tathagata's knowledge and conduct do meet this criterion, and that therefore the Buddha's Dharma, which is elsewhere he declares to be archaic and long forgotten, is identical with the way of the Vedic rishis. This is an important point because we will come to the metaphor where he, in the future sutta in which he does declare that the Buddha Dharma is a revival, if you like, or a return to an archaic original Dharma which has been long forgotten. But he doesn't make it clear in that allocation that it's identical with the way of the Vedic rishis. He leaves it open exactly what he's referring to. Here he's specific. He then asks Ambattha whether those ancient sages were addicted to the pleasures of the five senses, eating fine foods, amusing themselves with women, riding about in chariots, or guarded by soldiers in cities like themselves. Therefore, the Buddha concludes, neither Ambattha nor his teacher are sages nor trained in the ways of sages. They are charlatans. At this point, the Buddha gets up, goes outside, and begins to walk up and down himself, so that Ambattha, following, could examine his body for the marks of a great man, which, you will recall, was his original purpose. All of these were visible to Ambattha except two, the small penis and the large tongue. Therefore, the Buddha shows these two parts to him as well. At this point, Ambattha, mission accomplished, withdraws. Ambattha returns to the town and reports to Pukarasati, who was waiting for him in a park with a group of Brahmins, that the Buddha has all the signs of a great man. So he confirms what he set out to do. Then he told his teacher the whole story at Pukarasati's request. Pukarasati is incensed that Ambattha has been so rude to the Buddha, and is so angry that he kicks Ambattha and knocks him down and makes to go to see the Buddha himself. But the Brahmins note that it is too late to go to see the Buddha that day, and advise him to go the next day. Instead, Pukarasati goes home, directs that a meal be prepared, and then leaves for where the Buddha is, assisted by the light of torches, first by chariot and then by foot. Pukarasati goes to the Buddha and asks him about the conversation he had with Ambattha. So the Buddha tells him. Pukarasati asks the Buddha to excuse the rudeness of his young and foolish student, which the Buddha does. Confirming the fact of the marks of a great man for himself, Pukarasati invites the Buddha to come to his home for his morning meal. By this time, the text implies it is well after midnight, so the Buddha takes his robe and bowl, and the entire order, or at least whoever was with the Buddha at that time, travels back to Pukarasati's house for the morning meal. Since there is no suggestion of sleeping, it seems that Pukarasati and the Buddha spent the early morning hours talking together. After eating their fill, the Buddha gives a graduated discourse, followed by a sermon on the Dharma in brief. There are therefore three types of talk that are referred to in the Pali Canon. These are the graduated brief, the graduated brief and extended. The graduated discourse is intended as a lead-in to a Dharma talk proper, which is given when the hearer is ready, indicated by pliancy of mind, freedom from the hindrances, joy, and calm. Graduated talks concern general matters pertaining more to the householder than to the monastic life, including the virtues of generosity, morality, heaven, sense desires, and the value of renunciation, matters that we might call religious, referring, of course, to the path of the householder. The subject matter of the Dharma talk, in brief, and the extended Dharma talk, is, as Peter Macefield points out, indistinguishable, except for the length and perhaps the occasion. The Dharma talk, in brief, is often preceded a hearer's going forth, sometimes accompanied by the hearer's spontaneous awakening. In this sutta, the Dharma talk, in brief, corresponds to a sermon on the Four Noble Truths, but it can be about any topic. So, that's a little unclear. Just to be clear, so the Buddha gives after the meal, he gives a graduated talk, and then he gives a talk on the Dharma in brief about the Four Noble Truths. And as the Buddha speaks, the Dharma eye spontaneously arises in Pukarasati, shown by the realization that all samsaric things are impermanent, or anicca. Pukarasati converts on the spot, and becomes a lay follower of the Buddha. Okay, that completes the talk for today. Before we conclude with the dedication of merit, does anyone have any questions or anything they would like to discuss about anything in that talk? And while you're thinking about that, I will just get the text of the dedication of merit. So next week we'll be doing the fourth sutta in the Digha Nikaya, the title of which I'll post to the Dharma transmission to the West group. If you're not a member of the Dharma transmission to the West group, I do recommend that you join if you're interested in keeping track of my activities. And each week after this talk, I will post the title of the subsequent sutta that we're going to discuss next Saturday, for those who are following along. I know some of you are actually following the talk, reading the talks online in anticipation of the subsequent talk. So no one has any questions, it seems. So let's proceed with the dedication of merit, and I'll hang around for a few minutes if anyone thinks of anything they would like to ask about. Please join with me in dedicating the merit, whatever merit has been produced by this talk, to all beings. Whatever understanding, whatever positive force has come from this, may it go deeper and deeper and act as a cause to reach enlightenment for the benefit of all.